Data layers are a critical part of tracking with Google Tag Manager. Not only Google Tag Manager, but other tag managers and applications as well. In this masterclass, you will learn everything that you need to know about data layers. So if you're ready, let's dive in. So let's see what a data layer is. Data layer is a JavaScript object that sits on your pages. So it's part of your HTML code on your site. It contains all the data or information that you want to pass from your website to the other applications that need it. Let's take an example and see what that means. Let's say you have a web page which shows you the product detail. It has a name of product, price of product, color, size, etc. on this page. All this information is scattered throughout the page. Now, if a tag manager like Google Tag Manager or Adobe's Tag Manager, which is called Launch, or any other application needs that information so that they can set the appropriate tags or use that information for reporting, in that scenario, any tool that requires a specific information will have to go grab it from that section of the page. So if Google Tag Manager needs the name of the product, price of the product, color, and size, then a logic will have to be written so that Google Tag Manager can pull this information. Similarly, if another tool just needs the name of the product, then that logic has to be written. And this logic has to be written by the developer because each and every site is different. So Google Tag Manager cannot possibly write a logic that'll fit all the needs. Your product display page might be very different from my product display page. And hence, this is where a data layer helps. Using a data layer moves all the information into a data layer. So this is a JavaScript object which is sitting within your HTML code, and that contains all the information that you need on the page, as well as what these tags and tools will require. So when a page changes, let's say the size gets moved over to some other portion of the page, data layer does not change. And tools can be configured to go read from this data layer. So they don't have to worry about how the product page is displayed. They just worry about the structure within data layer. So now let's go and take a look at the structure of the data layer. Here is the format for data layer. Script basically means it's a start of a JavaScript, and then this is the end of the script. And in the middle of these two script tags is where you write your data layer. Keep in mind, JavaScript is case sensitive, which means you have to write data layer exactly as it's written here. Then you got equal sign, starting of your data layer, and then the values in key value pairs. So this is the key, how you will refer to a particular value, and then the actual value. So let's see how this translates into the example I was giving you earlier about a product detail page. So the data layer for this product detail page will look something like this, where you have the script and script. So that's where we are putting all our JavaScript, which is the data layer, and data layer equal to, and then you have the key and value. So key is the product. You can call it whatever you want. Just be consistent in your naming. Remote control, that's the value of that product. Price, the value of the price. Color, the value of the color. Size, the value of the size. All these values will then be available for the tag manager to use. This is a simple example of a data layer. Data layer can be more complex than this. Here is a little bit more complex data layer. In this example, instead of having one product, you have a product object that contains two different products. So this could be a data layer on a shopping cart, where the shopping cart has two items in it. So each product has its own key value pairs. So here's product 1 and then the product 2. As you'll notice in this, all these product values are again encapsulated in these square brackets. So right here is the N, and within those curly brackets, you have the key value pairs for the product attributes. So name, price, color, size, name, price, color, and size. So 2 products. And then it also has the name of the employee who's selling these products. These data layers are created by your developers. However, as an analyst working with Google Tag Manager, you need to understand the construct of the data layer so you can make sure it's capturing the right information, as well as you know how to grab the values within Google Tag Manager. Now let me go to a site and show you how data layer looks on the site. Here is a site that I will be using to show you an example of a data layer. There are a few different ways to look at a data layer on a given page. One of the ways is to right-click on the page and click on Inspect. Then go to Console and type in Data Layer. Make sure it starts with small d and has capital L for layer. Once you type that, hit Enter, and here you have all the data layer values. Keep in mind, data layer is an array, so you have several objects within that array. Object numbering starts from 0. 0 means the first object, 1 means the second object, and so on. Expanding any of these objects will give you the details of the values stored in this object. Objects can also have other objects, like you can see. Within the first object is e-commerce. Expanding that shows you the values that are contained within e-commerce object. That's one way of looking at it. There are also browser plugins that allow you to see the data layers that are on your pages. My preferred method to look at a data layer is either by going to the console, which is easy to understand once you understand the data layers. However, another way is to open this web page in the preview mode in Google Tag Manager. So let's go and now take a look at that method. Here I'm in the Google Tag Manager that's implemented on that site. I will put this Google Tag Manager in preview mode. Make sure to enter the URL that you want to test and then click on Connect. Now the page is loaded in the preview mode. Tag Assistant is connected. So let's go back to Tag Assistant and click on Continue. In the Tag Assistant window, click on Data Layer, and here you can see the current data layer. The values contained in this data layer are the same values that I showed you when I went to the console in the browser. And let me go back and show you these values once again. Here I'm back on the website. Right click, go to Inspect, and go to Console. If you see anything like this, that means there are some errors on your site. Simply click on Clear Console. That'll clear it up. Sometimes those errors might mess up with your data layers as well. So keep that in mind. Go ahead and type data layer, hit Enter. Here's e-commerce object. Go back to your Tag Assistant, and here you can see e-commerce. That contains currency code, detail, and then within detail you have products. So go back here. You have e-commerce, currency code, detail. Within detail, you have products. Similarly, you can see these values in the data layer as well. So if you go back here, all those values are listed here. So that's all about data layers. Go ahead and become familiar with data layers. Go and check your site or anybody else's site for data layers and see what values they store. As you're going through these sites, you might notice that every website has a different structure for a data layer because they use the data layers for different purposes. However, if you are going to be using GA4, then GA4 expects the data to be in a certain format. But don't worry, even if you do not have the right structure, you can convert that structure into appropriate GA4 structure by using JavaScript within Google Tag Manager. However, that's an advanced topic that requires the knowledge of JavaScript. So if you want to know how to do that, then make sure to take our JavaScript course. Now I will show you how to pull these values in Google Tag Manager. In order for you to pull the values from the data layer, you will need to create custom variables. So click on variables and then click on new in the user defined variables section. Click in the middle to configure the variable and scroll down to data layer variable. Click on it, and now you have to provide the name of the data layer variable that you want to pull in this variable. So let's go back to the data layer and see the variable name that we want to pull here. So here's the data layer again. So let's say I want to pull the value for e-commerce. So whatever is contained in e-commerce, I want to bring the whole thing in Google Tag Manager. So in order to do that, I will have to type this name exactly as is in the data layer variable in Google Tag Manager. Keep in mind that Google Tag Manager is a JavaScript code, which means it's case sensitive. So you will have to type this name exactly as is in Google Tag Manager, else it won't work. So in order to make sure that I do not make any mistakes in typing this value, I am just going to copy it from here and then paste it in Google Tag Manager. So let's go ahead and highlight this and right click to copy it. And then go back to Google Tag Manager and let's just paste it here. So that's all you need. Now let's go ahead and name this variable. I am going to call it DL e-commerce. Go ahead and save it. And now our variable is ready. Now let's create another variable. Click on new, click in the middle, and again pick data layer variable. Now let's pull another data layer variable. So let's go back to data layer. I am going to pull page post type. So let's go ahead and select this and copy it. Now let's go back to Google Tag Manager and paste the value of this variable. That's all you need. Now let's give this variable a name. So let's call it DL page post type. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just calling it the same name as the variable exists in the data layer, and DL stands for data layer. That's all. Now go ahead and save it. And now let's put our container in the preview mode to see the values of these variables. So click on preview. Make sure to enter the URL of your web page and click on connect. Now the page is loaded. Let's go back to Tag Assistant. Click on continue. Now go to Windows loaded. This is the final event that happens when the window is fully loaded. So click on variables and scroll down to see the values of the variables. Here's your DL e-commerce. It contains the whole object that was contained in e-commerce variables. If you go back, here you can see e-commerce and it has currency detail impression. Expanding that will show you all the values. And that's what's contained in this e-commerce variable. Scrolling down, you'll see the page post type, which is product. Go back and let's close these. And here you can see page post type product. So our values are coming as expected. You can repeat the process to get any values that you want from this data layer. Once you have these values pulled into variables in Google Tag Manager, you can use them in any tags, triggers, or other variables as you desire. In this example, we pulled a complete value of e-commerce object in a variable. However, there are other objects that are within e-commerce object, and sometimes you might need to pull the values from those specific objects. So let me go back to the data layer and show you the other objects that are within e-commerce. So here you can see within e-commerce you have currency code. Next is the detail array. Expanding that shows you that it has products array. Expanding that shows you the values contained within that array. So far we only have one item. However, there is also an impressions array. Expanding that shows you that it has 4 items in it. Expanding those will show you the actual values for different variables within that. So it's a bit complicated. If you want to fully understand how arrays and objects work, then I highly recommend that you enroll in the JavaScript for Marketing Analytics course. The link to the course is in the description of this video. Now I'm going to walk you through the steps of pulling the values that are nested within other values. First, I will show you how to pull currency code. Then we will go into the detail and individual products within detail. The process that I'm going to show you will also apply to any other nested objects. First, I am going to pull the value of currency code. So let's go ahead and copy this. The reason I copy these values is so that I do not make any spelling mistakes. You do not have to copy these values if you do not want to. You can simply type them in Google Tag Manager. So let's go to Google Tag Manager now. Here, I am going to make a copy of this data layer variable so that I don't have to start from scratch. Copy, and let's call this DL e-commerce currency code. Now, click where it says data layer variable name, and after e-commerce, put a dot, because currency code resides within e-commerce. That's why we use a dot notation to refer to it. So it's a child of e-commerce object. Go ahead and paste this. So this is what your data layer variable name looks like, e-commerce dot currency code. That means go grab e-commerce and then grab currency code within it. That's all you need. Go ahead and save it. And now let's preview to see if our value is coming as expected or not. Click on enter your website's URL in the tag assistant and click on connect. The page is now loaded. Let's go to tag assistant and click on continue. Click on window loaded and then click on variables. Scroll down and here you can see DL e-commerce currency code is pulling the value from currency code. So this is working as expected. Now we are going to create another variable to pull the values out of detail. Let's close the tag assistant and go back to Google Tag Manager. Again, let's click on this variable and make a copy of it so that we don't have to type everything again. Let's call this new variable DL e-commerce detail. I am going to evolve this variable step by step so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. Now, the next variable is called detail. Let me go back to the data layer and show you that value. And here is the detail. Using e-commerce.detail will return this object. So let's go back to Google Tag Manager and see the value that gets returned. And then we'll come back and then pull products and then go to the next level. So here I'm back in Google Tag Manager. Let's save this variable and do a preview. The window is loaded. Let's go back, click on continue, go to window loaded and click on variables. Scroll down and here you can see DL e-commerce detail that pulls only the detail value. It's an object that contains the products. Next, let's go down one level and pull the products. So let's just copy this here because that's the value I'm going to use, and then go back to Google Tag Manager and now pull up our DL e-commerce detail, and rather than making a copy, I'm just going to evolve it. So let's call it detail products. Go to your data layer variable name and type in again another dot and paste the value here. There is a gap, remove it. So now e-commerce.detail.products. So you're going one step at a time inside the e-commerce object. Go ahead and save it and put your container again in preview mode and click on continue. Go to window loaded and click on variables. Scroll down and here is your DL e-commerce detail products. Now all you see is an array that contains the value of products. Now I'm going to show you how to get the individual attributes of the products within this array. For example, let's pull the name of the first item in the array. So I'm going to copy this. Before we go to Google Tag Manager, keep in mind that when referencing items in an array, you still use the dot notation. However, in addition to providing the name of the variable, you also have to specify the index value of that item in the array. Index values start from 0. So first item has an index value of 0. Second item in the array has an index value of 1, and so on. This array contains only one item. That means the index of this object is 0. So let's go to Google Tag Manager and see how to pull this value. So I'm back in Google Tag Manager and I'm going to use the same variable and rename it. Now click on your variable name and then type the dot. But instead of putting the variable name, you first specify the index value of that product within array. So we know it's the first product, which is index of 0, and then you put in your variable name. In JavaScript, you refer to the index by putting square brackets. However, in Google Tag Manager, you do not use square brackets. Instead, you use dots. So that's all you need. Go ahead and save it. And now click on Preview. Click on Continue. Go to Window Loaded and click on Variables. Scroll down. And here you can see DL e-commerce detail product name is Beanie. So that's how you pull the values from nested objects. Now, once you pull the data layer values in the variables in Google Tag Manager, you can pass them to any tags, triggers, or variables as you want. Now let's talk about a few more things that you should know about data layers. Previously in this video, I showed you the syntax of the data layer as it's shown on your screen. However, the way it is written, it's defining a local variable called data layer. In order to ensure that this variable is available to any code on your page, it's recommended to use a global variable called window.datalayer. In addition to using window.datalayer, you or your developers, whoever is coding the data layer, should also include a line that makes sure that any existing data layer values are not overwritten by the new data layer. And that line is shown on your screen. If you're not familiar with variables, the scope of variables, and arrays, then check the description of this video for a link to the JavaScript course that I mentioned earlier in this video. So far, we looked at how the developer should code the data layer when it's available on a page. However, not every data layer can be available when a page loads. Let's take an example of an e-commerce site. In this site, when the page loads, we do not know what products user is going to add to their cart. So whenever user adds a product to a cart, the data layer values need to be updated with the information of the product that user just added. In that scenario, developers can use a data layer function called push. This pushes the value of the product or any information that they want into the data layer. In this example, we're pushing an array called items with the item information. But you can push any values that you want in the data layer. Developers can also use data layer push to push the values on the page load instead of the static values using the code that I showed you earlier. It depends on their coding style and when the values for the data layers are going to be available for them to use. This code ensures that the previous value of the data layer is not overwritten. All it's doing is pushing new values into the data layer. In addition to that, you can also use this code via Google Tag Manager. So if in your logic, you have to push certain values to the data layer, you can use datalayer.push. When you use any third-party plugins to add the values to the data layer, they use datalayer.push method. Example is a Google Tag Manager plugin on WordPress. This code can also be used within custom HTML code within Google Tag Manager. So if you have to dynamically change the values in the data layer via GTM, you can do that as well. Those use cases are covered in the Google Tag Manager course. You can find the link to that course in the description of this video. Once you push the values to the data layer, you can notify the Tag Manager that the data layer values have changed. In order to do that, you will add another attribute to your data layer, and that attribute is called event. The value of that attribute is generally the name that you want to assign to that event. So for example, when I am clicking on Add to Cart button, I want to call it Add to Cart. So that's why I have event : add to cart. This notifies the Tag Manager that the data layer values have changed. You can then track this event using custom event trigger in the Tag Manager, pull the values from the data layer and pass them to appropriate tags. Now I'm going to go to Google Tag Manager and show you an example of data layer push that happens when you click on Add to Cart button. I'm using a Google Tag Manager plugin on a WordPress site. So let's go to Google Tag Manager and see how that works. Here I'm in Google Tag Manager. I'm going to put it in the preview mode and click on Add to Cart. Let's go back to Tag Assistant. Let's scroll down and go to Add to Cart event. Expand the API call, and here you can see there is a data layer push with an event Add to Cart and various values that are pushed into the data layer. Once you have this event, you can create a custom event trigger in Google Tag Manager using this event name and then fire appropriate tags with the values that you need from this data layer. Here I am sending it to GA4. So here are all the values, the event name that I'm sending to GA4, and the trigger. As you can see, I'm using a custom event Add to Cart event. If you're not familiar with custom events in Google Tag Manager, then check the link in the description of this video. So that's all about the data layers. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. If you have any questions, then leave a comment for me. I will see you in the next video.